Without a doubt, slow burn romances are my favorite type of romances to read, and that is mostly because I'm a sucker for a good buildup. I love seeing multiple interactions between my two characters. I like seeing them have multiple conversations. I like watching their feelings slowly change for one another from wherever it is that they started with to wherever it is that they're going. That is what I'm here for. That is what I want my romance book to be about. I don't want to see that happen slowly in the beginning and then all of a sudden they give into their feelings and then that's the majority of the book, and then at the end they have a little bit of an issue and then they work it out and then that's their happily ever after. No. My favorite type of romances to read is watching the entire thing of them just slowly fall for each other and then finally, slowly but surely, give into their feelings. That's why I love a good slow burn romance, and that is why today I'm going to share with you a handful of my favorites. I will tell you, I have made this video once before in the past, so for some reason you don't find a recommendation in today's video, you have a total other video to check out that has a completely different stack of books, and I'll have it linked down below for you. But before we get into the recommendations, I wanted to quickly share with you a couple of words from the sponsor of today's video, which is Sean Stone. He is the author of a new release called Tribe of the Accord, which is a YA prehistoric fantasy novel. And in this story, you're following this young girl who has grown up her entire life in a prehistoric setting in the wilderness with her father. He has taught her everything that she needs to know to survive. But at the beginning of the story, he actually ends up getting abducted by a mysterious clan called the Ursa clan. So she is going to have to flee to unfamiliar land and put her survival skills to the test. And then along the way, she's going to end up forming friendships, and she joined a tribe in hopes of finding her father. So this book isn't just about being in the Stone Ages and hunting and gathering and learning to survive in the wilderness. It's also about this young, naive girl who ends up going through this journey of learning what it is to be a part of this world. She learns about social dynamics and forming relationships because she's never done that before, since she's been living her entire life in the wilderness with only her father. So it really is a story about self-discovery and watching this young girl grow throughout this journey that she's going to end up going through and figuring out what type of life she wants to live. So this book was inspired by things like The Hunger Games and Clan of the Cave Bears, which are two extremely popular stories. So if you have enjoyed those in the past, maybe you want to check this book out. I will also have a couple of pictures up on the screen just to give you an idea of the feel of the story. Like, these are some of the main characters and this is some of the settings for the story. Also in this book specifically, you have all of these symbols on the back of the book, which are technically called petroglyphs, I believe. And you again get to see like one of them at the top of each chapter to really give you that Stone Age feeling as you're reading. So if you were interested in checking out this book, or you know somebody who might be interested, I will have a link for it down in the description below so you can look more into it and purchase it if you are interested. So with that said, thank you again so much to Sean Stone for sponsoring today's video, and also make sure to check out his new release, Tribe of the Accord. So with that said, let's get into my slow burn romance recommendations. So I would be doing a dishonor to one of my favorite authors of all time if I did not put all of her books first in this video. So if you have not read any of these books by Mariana Zapata yet, I do not know what you're waiting for. I talk about her books nonstop on my channel, so I will not go into it here. I will instead have a link to a video that I made about every single one of these books and everything that you need to know about Mariana Zapata and what to expect, yada, 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 yada. I'll have a link down below in case you want to look more into these books. But the ones that I'm holding up are the ones that I recommended. These are all amazing slow burn romances, and if you really want to wait for it, I recommend checking out every single one of these. I love them so freaking much. So with all my favorite slow burn romances out of the way, let's go through some other books that are still slow burns, not as slow a burn as Mariana Zapata, because nothing will ever compare to any of her books, but these are still slow burns in themselves. So with that said, first up, I do have Meet You in the Middle by Devin Daniels. So this is such an underrated book, and I really want more people to check it out because I have read it twice now, and I loved it both times around. First, I read it physically, gave it a 5 stars, and then I read it via audio, gave it another 5 stars. Just as good the second time around. So I highly recommend checking this book out if you are into enemies to lovers. This is about a girl that is a Democrat, and then there's this guy that's a Republican, and they are both working for senators in their respective party. And at the beginning of the story, they end up having a meeting with each other, and they really do not get along right off the bat. So because they're both working in the office that senators work out of, I don't know what it's called, probably the Senate. Don't ask me. My point is that they're working in the same building. So they keep on bumping into each other, and they end up keep on playing pranks with each other, and they have a lot of banter, a lot of tension between the two of them. And then slowly throughout the book, they're going to keep on hanging out with each other. So they just end up somehow forming a friendship, and then that slowly ends up turning into more. So one thing that I absolutely loved about this story was the way that I so clearly saw the development throughout the relationship. Like, first off, you start with enemies, they're bantering, they don't get along, they're pulling pranks on each other, and then slowly all of that time spent with one another and interacting with one another ends up turning into some sort of friendship, even though they still have a lot of things that they don't necessarily like about each other and reasons why they still are going to keep on bantering. And then all of that time spent with each other slowly turns into them actually falling for each other. So I just really so clearly saw the development in this book, and it was technically a very classic slow burn enemies to lover sort of romance. So if all that sounds like something up your alley, I highly recommend giving this one a shot. I know some people are a little bit turned off by the idea of it being politics, but that just adds to the factor of the enemies to lovers and the reason why they have all of the tension and the angst between the two of them. So really, please check this book out. Next up, I have On the Rocks by Candy Steiner. So this is the first book in the Becker Brothers companion series. And in this story specifically, you are following a small town age gap forbidden romance. In this story, you have a girl that is the mayor's daughter, and she's been bred her entire life to basically be a politician's wife. She knew her entire life she's going to be marrying somebody to make her parents happy. And at the beginning of the story, she actually is currently engaged to a politician. So she goes home to her small town to start to get ready for her wedding. And when she's there, she ends up going to the whiskey distillery that her small town is very well known for, to go and pick out a barrel to give her fiance for a wedding present. And when she's there, she ends up running into Noah Becker, which is a guy that is known around town to be kind of a bad boy, and she has known him her entire life, but he's much older than her. They've never really been in the same crowds, but they know who each other are because it's a small town. And basically they're going to get to talking, and he's going to start to realize she's not as happy as she should be if she's an engaged woman about to marry the love of her life. So he actually says something about it. He's like, look, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And she's like, it's not that simple. And she doesn't. That's kind of the beginning of the end of her, of starting to think do I even want this? Do I really want to go through with this? Am I even happy? This is what I want my life to look like. And then slowly throughout the story, they're going to keep on bumping into each other because it's a small town, and they're slowly going to become friends. And obviously he's going to fall for her, but she's unavailable. So he's going to choose the friend zone over nothing. And he's kind of just going to be a shoulder for her to cry on. So if that means that he has to help with wedding planning, if that means that he has to help her complain about her current situation, and if she really wants to do that or not, he is just going to be there for her while slowly pining after her. So it is definitely a slow burn because it does take the entire book for her to basically realize if she wants to still be engaged to this guy or not, and therefore if she is available or not to be with the person that she's slowly falling for in this book. So that is the general gist of the story. I feel like I gave you more information than you even needed, but basically it was a good book. It was a slow burn, a forbidden age gap, small town. Highly recommend giving it a shot if it sounds like something up your alley. This next book is A Deal with the Devil by Elizabeth O'Rourke. So this is the first book in her Devil's Companion series, and I have read the first 3 books in this series. Really loved them all, and also all of them are slow burns, so technically I recommend all and any of them, but they were just going to talk about this one. So in this story specifically, you're following this girl who gets a job as a personal assistant for this very well-known plastic surgeon for the rich and famous. He also has quite a reputation for himself to be a playboy bachelor sort of guy, and she really does not like him, and in turn he really does not like her either. But they're going to have to work together because she needs the money and he needs a personal assistant. So it's got that forced proximity situation, but there's also a lot of banter and tension and angst and slow burn goodness. So I highly recommend checking this out if you need a quick and easy read, because I'm pretty sure this is only less than 300 pages, but still really great book. Cooper decided to join us for a minute. Say hello. Cooper, say hi, look. No? Next up, I have Wrecked Palace by Catherine Cowell. So this is a romantic suspense small town romance. In this story, you're following this girl who is the guardian to her 2 little siblings. A couple of years ago, she was away in college and something really bad happened in her home. Her parents are not really that great of people. And basically the 2 little siblings were about to be taken away and put into foster care if somebody didn't come and take care of them. So she decides to quit college and become, their guardian. So for the past couple of years, that's exactly what she's been doing. She's been working multiple jobs just to try to pay the bills and give these kids everything that they deserve. And she is struggling a little bit. So happens to be one of her jobs is working at the grocery store. So she asks her boss if she can get a couple of extra hours, and unfortunately he ends up turning her down because he doesn't really have anything extra for her to do. But happens to be one of the guys that have been coming into this grocery store for the past couple of years ends up overhearing their conversation, and he feels kind of bad. So he ends up offering her a job instead, and she ends up taking it because he's offering her a lot of money and she really needs the money. The thing is that this guy is kind of a recluse. He lives in this small town for a reason. He was kind of running away from something that happened in his past. He kind of doesn't really like to talk to anybody. He just is sticking to himself, trying to work through whatever it is that he's working through. But now that she's working for him, they are slowly obviously going to grow close. She's going to start opening him up. They're going to slowly become friends. He's going to get close to the kids, and then obviously a romance is eventually going to happen. So besides for the fact that this is definitely a slow burn romance, I think what I really loved about it was just the way that it was specifically built up. The way how they kind of he didn't really talk to anybody and they weren't really even close or anything, then they slowly became friends, and then he slowly let not only her into his life, life, but the kids as well. And they all became close as a unit. And then they eventually like pulled the romance into the story as well. So just the way that the whole thing like developed in itself, I was a really big fan of. And then on top of that, you do have that suspense aspect, which kind of makes it a little bit more interesting than just a plain romance. So all around the board, I had a really great time with it. So I would definitely recommend it if you like romantic suspense, small town, slow burn romances. Next up, I have Down Too Deep by Jay Daniels. So this is actually another single parent story, except in this book, you have two single parents. So in this book, you're following this guy named Nathan, and his wife had suddenly passed away 2 years ago, right after giving birth to his daughter. So he is kind of completely lost in his grief, and he doesn't really know what to do. So he basically ends up pawning off his kid to his parents for like them to take care of, because he really doesn't know how to be like a single dad at this time. And instead, he just completely focuses on work. And now it's 2 years later, he doesn't really know his kid. His parents have been doing most of the work, and they kind of finally had enough. They're like, look, we want to be grandparents, not parents. So he basically has to take his kid back and figure out how to take care of her, except he has no clue what he's doing. So he ends up starting to bring her to work until he can find a babysitter. And while he's at work, he owns a restaurant, this woman walks in, and she happens to be a single parent as well. And she is currently working from home while summer break is going on, and she's babysitting her two kids over the summer. And she basically realizes that he's kind of struggling, and he has a little kid. He doesn't seem to know what he's doing. So she offers to babysit, because she's like, look, I'm already taking care of my two kids. What is one more? And he's like, are you serious? Please. So basically she ends up becoming the babysitter, and then slowly it's going to end up being their romance. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this book, because not only does it have like that whole like babysitter aspect, both of them are single parents, but also he now has to learn how to be a parent to his daughter, and she is slowly going to teach him. And at the same time, they're slowly going to fall for each other, but he is still like grieving his wife and everything that he's dealing with. So there's a lot to unpack there. So basically there's just a lot of really good stuff going on in this book. I really, really, really loved it at the time that I read it. And it definitely does have a slow burn, because like I said, the characters are dealing with a lot in this story. So therefore it does take a while for them to actually go through it so that they could finally get their happily ever after. Next up, I have The Birthday List by Devney Perry. So I did recently just talk about this book on my channel because it was in my favorite reads from 2022 video, but we're going to talk about it again because it's a really good slow burn romance and it deserves to be in this video. So in this story, you're following this girl where 5 years ago, her husband was murdered and she's having a very hard time grieving him and getting over what happened. So she has been going through his bucket list. Like he basically made a birthday list, which is a bucket list, and she's been slowly ticking off everything that he wanted to do with his life that he couldn't actually do as a way to grieve him and hopefully get over him. And basically, while she's doing all these things on the list, she ends up bumping into the cop that was there for her the night that her husband died, and it was the one that had told her what actually happened. And he basically decides to join her in this endeavor of going through the bucket list, and slowly but surely, they're obviously going to end up falling for each other. So what I really liked about this book is that you had such a serious aspect to it because, you know, she's a grieving widow. She's really trying to get over her past love. That's why she's doing everything that she's doing in this book, because she's really having a hard time saying goodbye of sorts. At the same time, she's also starting to fall for somebody else. Like her eyes have been completely closed to men this entire time, and all of a sudden, like somebody's coming in front of her, and all of a sudden she's starting to have these feelings that she hasn't had for a while. So that's a lot to unpack for somebody going through something that she's going through. So you definitely have to go through that journey with her while she's dealing with all of that. But at the same time, you also have this really fun aspect because every single chapter they're checking something else off of the bucket list. So you have a really light and fluffy sort of moment, like with them doing all these fun experiences, but then also you have like the behind the scenes of like her really dealing with everything that she's dealing with. So I just thought that it made for like an all around the board really, really great read. Like it was captivating, it was fast paced, it was fun, it was serious, it had everything going for it. And then on top of all of that, it also had a good build up and a slow burn romance. So obviously I recommend checking it out. And then another book that I wanted to share with you, even though I did recently mention it on my channel because it was in my favorite reads of 2022 video, but I had to mention it again because it was one of my favorite reads from last year and it was also a slow burn. So I'd be doing you and it a disservice if I didn't recommend it to anybody who had possibly missed the recommendation last time. So that book is Forbidden by Carla Sorensen. So this book is the fourth book in the War Sisters Companion series. And if for some reason you still don't know what this book is about, even though I mentioned it like 1,000 times in the past, I will tell you what it's about again. So in this story, you're following this girl who is the manager for a boxing gym, and happens to be at the beginning of the story, you find out that the gym is getting new ownership. And who do you know is purchasing the gym? This ex-MMA fighter that this girl has had a crush on her entire life. Like literally posted on the wall, would always compare other guys to this guy. No one would ever live up to him sort of situation. And now he's her new boss. And then on top of that, he is like 10 or so years older than her, and he is a widowed single dad to a little girl. So that is more or less like the whole situation of it. And it is just a really good book. It's a quick and easy read, and yet it is still very much a slow burn. I'm pretty sure they don't really get together until like the 70% mark or so at least. So if you were looking for a slow burn that's a quick, easy read and just all around the board, really solid story, highly recommend giving this one a shot, obviously because it was one of my favorite reads from last year. And then the last books that I wanted to share with you for today's video was actually my favorite read from 2022. So again, I did just mention this on my channel before, so if you saw that video, you You might already know this rec, but I feel like, again, it would be a disservice to you and me to not share with you these books in case you weren't aware that they were a slow burn romance. So those books are Binding 13 and Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. So these books are freaking massive. You do have to read both of these to get your happily ever after. This one ends off on a cliffhanger. You're going to want to have this one on hand so that you can keep going. They're also freaking massive. There's hundreds and hundreds of pages in these books, and the words are freaking tiny. So it is quite a commitment to decide to read these books, but it is a very worthwhile commitment. So let me tell you what these actually are about so I can convince you to read them. So in this story, you're following this girl who has been bullied her entire life, and it eventually gets way too bad that her parents pull her out of that school and put her into a private school to try and make it a little bit better. And when she gets there, she ends up bumping into the rugby prodigy slash popular guy in school on the first day, and right away he finds out why she transferred schools, and therefore he's going to become extremely protective of her. So it's kind of like a guy falls first, guy falls harder. He's going to protect her, always be around the corner to save her anytime she needs help sort of situation. And that is more or less the gist of the story, but there is so much more going on besides that. You have this entire group of friends that you get to fall in love with. There are so many amazing side characters that honestly I enjoyed more than even the main characters. And then on top of that, you have a very slow burn romance because it does take the entire first book for them to actually like kind of get together, and then the entire second book is getting to watch them get together. So if you are a fan of slow burns but also enjoying seeing when they actually get together, this is the best of both worlds, because in book one it's a slow burn, in book two you get to see them have an actual relationship. So that is more or less like the gist of both of these stories. It is a very intense read though. Did I not say that yet? Yeah, you definitely have to look up trigger warnings for these books because there are a lot of like very serious things going on in both of these characters' lives. Like there's abuse, there's bullying, there's like parental stuff going on that is like not really good situations. Like she does not come from a very good home, and there's a lot of serious stuff. Like this is not a lighthearted book whatsoever. But if that's something that you enjoy reading about, I definitely recommend looking into these books more and then probably giving them a shot, because like I said, they were my favorite reads from last year and I absolutely love them. So with that said, that is all the books that I wanted to share with you for some of my favorite slow burn romance reads that I highly recommend giving a shot. So if you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to my channel if you're not currently subscribed, because why the hell not? But either way, just thank you so much for watching my video because I really do appreciate it. And again, make sure to check out all the links I'll have in my bio for the sponsor of today's video, which was Sean Stone for the Tribe of the Accord. Thank you again so much for sponsoring today's video because I really do appreciate it. And also I'll have all the links to all the random videos that I probably mentioned throughout this video. But either way, with that said, I'm gonna go. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, enjoy reading.